This video is a recorded webinar, the final part in the Every Drop Counts series, brought to you by Piedmont Environmental Alliance, a nonprofit in Winston-Salem that educates the public on ways to make a positive impact on the environment.
Hi everyone, I'm Carolina. I am a student at Wake Forest University. My major is anthropology and I'm also an environmental studies minor. And I'm also an environmental education intern at the Wake Forest Office of Sustainability. And we work with PEA to bring you these materials.
Hello everyone, and I'm Julia. I am also a Wake Forest University student. I am a junior majoring in biology and minoring in environmental studies, and I am the other environmental education intern with the Wake Forest Office of Sustainability, and we are so excited to be able to present this to you today. All right, so to start off, you've probably watched the previous videos to this webinar, and in those videos, you learned that water is necessary for all living organisms to survive on Earth, but we also learned that the amount of fresh water that humans can use on this planet is very limited. Can anyone remember what percentage of water on Earth is actually fresh water?
Is it 3%?
Yes, you're right. It is 3%. Right. So out of our entire Earth, only 3% of that water is fresh. And even less of that is actually accessible in our rivers and lakes to be able to drink. So we know that our water is very, very, very limited on Earth. And there are many different problems threatening it. So moving forward, we need to make sure we have enough water on this planet for all humans to use. So what do you guys think we can do about this? How can we address the fact that our limited freshwater resources are threatened? What can we do to make sure that we have enough later on?
We could do the 3 R's, like reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Good, yeah, that's a good starting point. Yes, we can use the 3 R's to reduce, reuse, and recycle our water. I'm thinking of the word that starts with a C that means to save. Does anyone know what that word is?
Conservation.
Yes, exactly, water conservation. So that's one of the biggest solutions that we can do individually is conserve our water. So how have you guys used water already this morning?
I brushed my teeth.
Good. All right, so we've got brushing our teeth.
Washed my hands.
You washed your hands. That's really good, especially in times of COVID.
Took a shower.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. You took a shower. Did anyone have a glass of water this morning? You drank it? Anyone? All right. So those kinds of uses that we can actually see the water being used are called direct water usage. So when you turn on the faucet to brush your teeth, you can see the water dripping out of the faucet. These direct water usages actually only make up about 5% of the water we use on a daily basis. So where do you guys think the other 95% of the water we use comes from? What else do you do on a daily basis that might use water?
Like heating and cooling systems?
Yes, those actually fall more into direct water usages because they're directly using that water. How many of you have to drive to get to the grocery store or to school? Yeah, I see nodding heads. So do you guys think that the gas that goes into those cars takes water to make?
Yes.
Yeah, actually every mile that you drive in your car is equivalent to 7 gallons of water to make that associated gas. So depending on how long you travel in your car, you could be using a lot of water to do that. Who ate breakfast this morning? Does no one eat breakfast? Okay, I see some nodding heads again. I know some people don't eat breakfast, but depending on the food you eat, some of those foods use a lot of water to make in the process from growing. So take cereal, for example. You have to use water to grow the grains, and then you have to use water to process the grains to make the cereal. And then again, you have to use water to transport that cereal from the production facility to the grocery store, and then from the grocery store to your house. So all that water adds up. There's one other big category of indirect water usages, this other category of water use. We're all wearing clothes right now. Do you guys want to take a guess at how much water it takes to make a pound of cotton? No wrong answers.
Guess, like 30 gallons per one article of clothing, but then I guess that depends on the size of the article of clothing.
That's a good starting guess,
Okay.
but it's actually a lot more than that. Someone throw out another number.
Maybe 100 gallons?
It is. It's actually 100 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of cotton. So depending on how big your shirts are, or how big your dresses or your pants or that kind of thing are, it could be more water than that. And that's all the water that it takes to grow the cotton and then process that cotton into making clothing. So to summarize what we just talked about, your individual water use are those direct water usages like we talked about. Someone said showering, someone said brushing teeth. Those are all this darker blue drop at the beginning. And then the rest, 95% of the water we use is this indirect water usage, the water that's used to produce goods like clothing and fuel. And then we also talked about food. So one of the other things when we talk about water usage, we want to talk about water footprint. So has anyone ever heard the word water footprint before? Has anyone heard the word ecological footprint? Yeah, so for those of you who have heard ecological footprint, what does that mean?
It's like how you impact the environment around you with your daily actions.
Awesome, exactly. So water footprint is very closely related to that. Water footprint just basically means how you're impacting the environment based on the amount of water you use. So the more water you use, the higher your water footprint. So earlier you guys mentioned a few activities already today that you had used water. Which one of those activities do you think has the largest water footprint?
I think probably like eating food, just because like it takes a lot for like.
Yes,
planting.
you were definitely right. Food has a really big water footprint, but out of those direct usages, so like we talked about showering and brushing teeth and drinking it and things like that, which one of those do you guys think has the highest water footprint?
Showering.
Yes, exactly. How many of you guys are the people who take 30-minute showers? So you like to relax in the shower? Do I have any of those? No. Or are you guys mostly like me and I like to get in and out in 5 minutes? Okay. So those 5-minute showers have a lot lower water footprint than the big showers, because the less time you're in the shower, the less water you use. So we talked about those direct water usages, brushing teeth, showering, those kind of things. So what do you guys think you can do to conserve water with your direct water usages? How can we save water individually?
Maximize efficiency of our like faucets and stuff.
Yes, exactly. On this diagram, we see low flow shower head and low flow toilets. So those make sure that the least amount of water possible comes out when you're using them. That's a good example. What can we do while we're brushing our teeth to make sure that we're not wasting water?
Turn off the faucet.
Exactly. We can just turn off the faucet while we're brushing our teeth. And then most of you guys said you shower, but if you know anyone that takes baths, you can encourage them to take a shower instead, because showers still use a lot less water than the bath. And now in terms of those indirect water usages, someone mentioned earlier that food has one of the largest water footprints, and that was exactly correct. So this graph on the screen shows the water footprint per type of food. And over here to the left, we have our bovine meat, which basically is the cow meat. So the red meats that go into hamburgers and things like that. So that has the largest water footprint. And it actually takes 1,800 gallons of water to make 1 pound of ground beef. So one family of 4 hamburgers for an evening, 1,800 gallons of water went into that. So when we're talking about food and the water footprint associated with that, how do you guys think we can reduce our water footprint based on the food we eat?
Reducing your consumption of meat and dairy products.
Exactly. That's an awesome behavior change. And it's not like you have to cut meat entirely out. You can switch from those red meats to poultry meat. As you can see here, poultry meat has a lot lower water footprint. And you can participate in things like Meatless Mondays, where you can challenge your friends and your family to go a full day without eating meat. And you could even include dairy products in there, because sometimes people do forget about the dairy product side of the bovine and other cow products. Does anyone else have any suggestions for how we can change our food water footprint?
Eat more locally sourced foods.
Exactly. Yes, that ties in really well with the gas too, saving gas. When we eat local, that reduces the transportation time, so we're using less water to make the gas to transport it. That's an awesome example. So you already sort of focused us over to transportation. How can we individually alter the water footprint that we have with our with the fossil fuels that we use to power our cars? How can we reduce that?
We could carpool with
Carpooling is a
friends.
great example. It's probably going to be a little easier post-COVID, but it's an awesome idea. What else can we do instead of carpooling to reduce our time in the car?
Take a bus.
Take a bus. That's also probably a better example post-COVID, but yes, public transportation is an awesome option. In Winston-Salem, it's a little harder to come by, but in bigger cities around the US, if you go on a family trip, you guys can take public transportation instead of renting a car. What else can we do instead of driving in a car?
You could walk or bike.
Yes, awesome. Walking or biking. And that's obviously easier if you live close to the places you're trying to go, but we can always try to reduce the amount of time that we're spending in a car. And that last category that I brought up about indirect water usages, we talked about food, cars, and then what was that other thing that we talked about that has a big indirect water usage? Clothing, exactly. So how many of you have been to Goodwill or a thrift store? Okay, good. So thrift stores are awesome. They sell usually secondhand or third-hand clothes, and basically if you're going there to buy used clothes, that means you're buying clothes that didn't have to have new cotton grown and processed to make your clothing. So shopping at those stores instead of buying new clothing is a really good way to reduce your indirect usage of water and reduce your overall water footprint.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. So that wraps up our first solution here to conserve water and brings us into our next solution, which is to maintain water quality. What are some threats we can think of to our water quality?
Oil spills.
Oil spills, definitely. And what's like that big word that like encompasses oil spills and everything else? The P word.
Pollution.
Pollution, exactly. So pollution, and then you mentioned oil spills as an example of pollution. What are some like big real life examples of a big pollution event?
There was the oil spill by, I think, BP 10
Right.
years ago.
Right. So I don't know if you guys remember that one. It was a little while ago, I think like 2012 maybe, was the BP oil spill. It was a massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's definitely one big example. Does anyone know one like a little more locally?
There was the, there was a, oh man, words. There's a factory, I think it was in between like Raleigh and Wilmington. I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina. And the, it was called Gen X, right? I think, no. Oh man, I cannot, let me look it up real quick.
There's also one, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Dan River spill. Is anyone familiar with that one? Does anyone want to share some details about that one?
Didn't Duke Energy have something to do with it?
Yes. Yeah, so it was 2014 and Duke Energy, their coal ash pond actually ended up spilling into the Dan River. It was about 39,000 tons of coal ash that spilled into the Dan River, which is a drinking water source for some North Carolinians. So it did have some major impacts on people who rely on the Dan River. Yeah, so these are like big corporation-caused, big, large-scale pollution events. However, there's also small-scale pollution happening in our yards, in our front yards, in our streets every single day. Does anyone know what that kind of pollution might be called? Like when it rains and it carries stuff.
Runoff?
Runoff, yeah, exactly. So runoff pollution, like I said, it happens in our streets, in our front yards. So it's a really common problem and we're the cause, right? Go to the next slide, Julia. So what are some examples of runoff pollution?
Like fertilizer from your yard.
Definitely, fertilizer is a big one. What does fertilizer do? Does anyone know when it runs off? Why does it
Doesn't
matter?
it cause like plant growth and like sewage or wherever the water goes?
Yeah, definitely. So it can actually end up leading to this process called eutrophication in our local waterways. So when that chemical runs off into local lakes or ponds or rivers or whatever, it could lead to like algae blooms, which could end up being toxic to some folks. What other runoff pollutants are there? Does anyone have a dog? Yeah?
Yeah, the dog's waste.
Yeah, who picks up dog poop every day? No one, right? That's a lot of work and it's gross. Does anyone like, is that their like chore in their house? No, yeah. So sometimes if we leave the dog poop out, we don't pick it up because it's a gross task. It rains and that waste is picked up and it's carried into our local waterways. So that's definitely one runoff pollutant. What else?
That's from like a car.
Yeah, definitely. So there's car, motor oil, antifreeze. If any of you guys, my chore is always to like wash the car or wash the pet. So when you wash your car or wash your pet, that soap or whatever is going to run off as well. Any other ideas? Awesome. Well, so we know what the problem is now. What can we do to fix it? What do we do about these different pollutants? What about fertilizer? What can we do there?
Put less in your yard if you use it. That way there's not excess that's washed away.
Definitely, yeah, we can use less for sure. What else?
Don't use it before it rains.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really easy solution, is to check the weather beforehand before you apply fertilizer. And then, of course, the other solution is just to not use fertilizer at all, right? What about your pet and your car? Like when you wash them, what can you do?
You could like, I don't know, like dump the soap you use down the drain or something.
Yeah, definitely. So one option is like if you have like a really big sink or a tub in your house that you're gonna wash your pet in, you can do that and the soap goes down the drain. You can try to contain the soap somehow in other situations. What else?
Maybe there are types of soaps and stuff that are less harmful to the environment, so maybe like a biodegradable thing.
Definitely, yeah. So there are biodegradable soaps. You can look it up, and I think there are like recipes online to make your own soap out of like just things you have in your kitchen as well. So that's always an option. And then you can also wash your car or your pet in gravel or grass instead of your driveway, just to reduce that risk of runoff if the other options aren't available to you. What about your pet waste?
You could pick it up.
Yeah, that one's pretty easy. And then finally, about your car, you've got the motor oil and the antifreeze and all the car waste. What can you do to reduce that runoff?
You could park in your garage if you're able.
Yeah, park in your garage, definitely. There's one, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Get your car checked up on more regularly to make sure it's not spilling anything out.
Yeah, maintain your vehicle. Get it checked up whenever. What else? There's one big solution, and you're going to hear it for every time we talk, actually.
Electric cars.
Electric cars, yeah, definitely. Or you can just do what? What did Julia talk about? You can just drive less, right? So you can have all these alternatives to driving. Of course, in COVID, we have to be a little more careful about public transportation and carpooling, but riding your bike or walking whenever possible, because when you drive, you know, there's not runoff happening in your driveway, but like on the streets that you drive on or wherever you park your car, right? So just driving less is always a great solution, right? All right, so there's another big kind of pollution that you hear about often. Does anyone know what that might be?
Air pollution?
Air pollution, definitely. Think about our waterways, though. What other things end up in our waterways other than like runoff?
Trash.
Trash, exactly. Litter, and more specifically, plastics. It's a really big problem to water quality, right? Does anyone know why plastics are such a big problem for water quality?
They don't biodegrade.
Exactly. They can take up to hundreds of years to biodegrade in our oceans, in our waterways, etc. So where are plastic pollutants coming from?
Packaging.
What was that?
Packaging. Like
Packaging, definitely. All those Amazon packages. What else? What are like the most common pieces of plastic in your life?
They use it to like for water and food, stuff like that.
Yeah, so you brought up one really good one, water bottles, right? Plastic water bottles are a big problem. What about when you go shopping? Where do you see plastics?
Bags.
Bags, exactly. So we've named some really common pieces of plastic in our daily lives. What can we do to reduce plastics?
Bring a reusable bag.
Exactly, reusable bags is a big one. What about if you forget your reusable bag? What can you do?
There's normally paper bags available.
Yeah, definitely. Paper bags, and then what if you have to get a plastic bag?
Reuse the
Use
bag.
it.
Right, exactly. You can reuse them. I use them as trash bags in my house. That's one solution. What about water bottles? What can we do there?
Have a reusable one.
Yeah, exactly. You can have a reusable water bottle. If you just end up with plastic water bottles because they're everywhere, there are a lot of fun things you can do with them that don't involve throwing them away. So you can, I've seen like little planters with plastic water bottles, right? Different kind of art projects you can do if that's something that interests you. What about like when you pack your lunch? What can you do?
Use reusable containers.
Yeah, definitely. Like Tupperwares, reusable containers. I got like these reusable baggies from like Marshalls or something that I use. What else? Does anyone's mom have like a membership to like Costco or I'm blanking on the other one, Sam's? Yeah, and do they like come home with those like big boxes of like individually packed like Doritos or whatever? Maybe not Doritos, but you get my gist. Yeah, so every one of those baggies is plastic and they're gonna end up in the trash can. So what can we do instead?
Get more items that are like in bulk without individual packaging.
Yeah, definitely buy in bulk, get as big of a container as possible, and then when you have to pack it for lunch, you put it in your reusable containers. And then there's like the other really obvious one. Anyone know what it is? It's like last year with the Visco girls. What did they have?
Reusable straws.
Yeah, reusable straws or even biodegradable straws. Yeah, so these are all really great solutions you guys can use to decrease your own plastic use. If you want to go a little bigger, and I know you guys all do, what can you do locally? Does anyone have like a favorite restaurant that they go to? A local joint? Yeah, so usually if it's like a smaller business, maybe you're like regular or something and you really want them to stop using plastics, just chat with someone, like see what you can do to make that change locally. You know, the biggest change happens when we work together. So if everyone is going to this one restaurant and getting plastic straws, but then you make them switch to biodegradable straws, then that's great, right? You've made a really big change there. There's also one other really easy solution you guys can use. The 3 R's.
Recycle.
Recycle, exactly. So recycling, you know, you've done all this work, you've cut out most of the plastics in your life, but you still got a few pieces. Recycle or just dispose of all of them properly when you can. Awesome, so that's some really easy ways to, you guys can personally, individually, or collectively maintain water quality.
Awesome. So now we're going to move into our third solution, which is addressing more systemic issues. So can anyone remember one of the other threats to our water supply on a global scale that we talked about in the other videos? It starts with a C, or actually 2 C's. Anyone? All right, I'm thinking about climate change. So in the video, we discussed the ways that climate change will impact our lives globally and locally. And I just want to hear from you all kind of what words or topics come to mind when you think about climate change, because it is such a broad, overarching issue that can mean a lot of different things. And so Julia is going to create a word bubble of just all the different words and topics that you all shout out. So go ahead and just unmute whenever you have something, and anything that you associate with climate change will go in the word bubble. So what do you think? What words do you associate with climate change?
Global warming.
Great, that's a good one.
Greenhouse gases.
Great.
The ozone layer.
What else?
Pollution.
Great. Yeah, we can think about the causes of climate change too.
Extreme weather.
Yeah. What kind of extreme weather have we been seeing lately in the news?
Hurricanes.
Hurricanes. What else? Like out west?
Fires.
Forest fires. What else do we think about?
Habitat loss.
Yeah, exactly. We can think about different animals that are impacted by climate change.
Maybe even
Anyone have an endangered species that they care a lot about?
Extinction of species.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? All right, well, I think this is a great list. And so we want to keep all of these things in mind as we start talking about climate change, and specifically what we can do to stop global warming and all of its consequences. It's a massive issue, and it may not seem like there's anything that we can personally do to help, but that's not true. There's been a lot of research about how to prevent climate change, and we know what we have to do. We should keep fossil fuels in the ground and quickly transition to 100% renewable energy. The science says it's still possible to stay under 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, but we'll need to halve our emissions by 2030. That's only 10 years from now. But renewable energy is getting cheaper and more popular every day. And as renewables grow and provide more clean, free energy to replace fossil fuels, we've seen emissions decrease in many countries. And we're not alone in this. There's a worldwide movement to stop the climate crisis and resist the fossil fuel industry, and it's growing stronger every day. But we can start with some individual personal actions. So what are some small things we can do in our everyday lives to reduce our climate footprint? And this will be a lot of the same things that we said for water, because that's a big part of it. So what do you think? What can we do?
Transition to more like using reusable bags and water.
Right, okay, so reducing our consumption, trying to be choose sustainable alternatives. What else? And there's some hints on the slide if you want to use those.
Recycle more.
Exactly, recycle.
We could switch to the plant-based diet.
Yeah, so that's one of the bigger impacts because as we talked about, meat uses a lot of water. Cows emit a lot of gases that are harmful, and it takes a lot of energy to transport meat. And so a plant-based diet is more sustainable. Or even if you don't want to switch completely, you can do like meatless Mondays, or maybe even switching out some dairy alternatives. Has anyone tried oat milk or almond milk? Yeah.
Oatly.
You can actually make your own oat milk, which is a really cool project if you're interested in that, and it's more sustainable. What else? What do you do like when you walk in a room and the lights are off and it's dark? You switch on the lights, right? Do you think that all the lights in your house need to be on all the time? No. So just being really conscious about your energy use, because every time you flip on the lights, that's connected to a power plant that is also using a lot of energy and greenhouse gases and burning coal and impacting climate change. And so thinking about ways you can conserve energy. Does anyone keep their phone plugged in all night to charge it? Yeah, maybe. Your phone actually only takes like an hour to charge completely. So maybe trying to do that during the day or when you can watch and see when it's fully charged and then unplug it. What else might you keep plugged in all day that is just wasting energy? Does anyone like playing video games? And maybe you keep like a PlayStation or something like that plugged in all day. It doesn't really need to be plugged in unless you're actively using it. And so a great way to conserve energy is just to go through your house and start unplugging things that you aren't using and that don't need to be plugged in all the time. All right, and then what about transportation? We talked about driving less and riding a bike and carpooling. Those are all great. What about like bigger travel, like going on vacations and using a plane? Do you think that has a big impact? Yeah, as you can see on the graph, it's actually one of the bigger high impact solutions is just to use a plane less. So maybe going on a smaller trip, traveling less, going on a road trip instead of flying. That's an important way to reduce our carbon emissions. Okay, so while these individual actions are important, think about how much you can accomplish as a group. So what ways do you think we can work together to tackle climate change?
Work with our community to like lessen their uses.
Yeah, that's awesome. Spreading the word and having these conversations with business owners and your parents and people that you know in the community so you can spread that knowledge and that impact about how to live more sustainably. What else? Do you have like an environmental club at your school? Or maybe you're part of an environmental club? Yeah, what ideas do you have about like starting a club that could impact climate change?
There are a couple clubs in town that do a lot of talks about environmentalism and a lot of community work, like gardening.
Yeah, those are awesome examples about how you can join forces and try to create solutions that go beyond just your personal actions. All right, so that brings us to the end of our presentation. So what have we learned? What actions might you start doing to help protect your water and community? Just to recap, what are some of these solutions that we've been saying throughout this whole thing?
Consume less meat.
Yeah, exactly. Plant-based diets.
Reuse our clothes or like give them out to other people. Maybe just have it with like friends, or I know some of my friends do little donations where they sort through all their clothes and pass it along to other friends, but that can extend out to the broader community as well. And we can buy from those like used stores as well.
Yeah, those are awesome examples of reducing our consumption, reusing clothing.
Be water and energy cautious with everything you do.
Exactly. Being super cognizant of how much water you're using, how much energy you're using, how much electricity, and trying to limit that when possible.
Using fewer like single-use plastics.
Yes, transitioning to more reusable materials, buying in bulk. Any others?
Trying to drive less.
Yeah, being super cognizant of our transportation and maybe alternatives to that. Cool. Well, those are all great solutions, and I'm so glad that we have had this discussion. And just remember that every drop counts. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to our sponsors for making this video possible.